Happy Wednesday, day after the primary elections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Post-election hangover is what
not
people
the
call it.
Yeah, the primary. Yeah,
Primary.
I'm tired.
Wow. Yes. How much election did you have?
Yeah. So thanks for watching The Big Picture. We're going to break down some of those races right now. A lot of, some of them expected.
Sure.
And then obviously several of the levy failures that we saw around the region. We'll address some of those levy failures coming up later around 9:40 this morning. But right now, I do want to bring in Dr. Nicole Califf-Hughes from Bowling Green State University. She is here to kind of talk about some of those races that we saw last night. Dr. Califf-Hughes, thanks for joining us on this Wednesday. Long night for you, obviously. But were there any surprises in any of the races from last night in your eyes?
I don't think so. I think a lot of what we saw was really what we expected to see. I have election results pulled up on my second monitor, so I'm going to look away for a second. But a lot of what we saw were the candidates that were expected to do well and were expected to advance. They were candidates who have already put a lot of money into their campaigns, and I think we're going to see a much larger influx of cash into our general election season, probably starting this morning. I think the really interesting races are that Ohio's 9th congressional district, which is up closer to me outside Toledo. That's probably going to be one of the most competitive races for the U.S. House, probably across the country, definitely across Ohio, but probably across the country. I think we're going to see a really competitive Senate race for that Ohio Senate seat that's up. And that one, if you recall, 2 years ago was the most expensive Senate race in the country. And I think we're probably going to see something similar going forward.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Califf-Hughes, looking at the GOP primary for governor, Vivek Ramaswamy, a lot of people say it was a landslide, right? More than 80%. But still, Casey Putsch took 20% of the GOP votes. Is that concerning, do you think, for the Ramaswamy camp now moving into the general?
I don't know if it's concerning. It's probably about what his campaign expected for kind of the challenger. I think his campaign always expected to win. I think that's what most people expected to happen. And so what Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign is going to have to do, they're going to have to appeal to the 20% of people who did not support him, who are registered Republicans and who did vote in that primary. And they're then going to have to try to appeal to moderates or centrists who could be persuaded either way. And so that's what they're going to have to spend essentially the next 6 months now trying to do, is trying to appeal to these voters that they either didn't get last night, who are Republicans, or Democrats on the margins who may be convinced to support his campaign. What's going to be a little bit different in the fall relative to where we were, 2 years ago, is that Trump isn't on the ballot. And so it's a midterm election, which is great for many gubernatorial races in that you don't necessarily have national politics to contend with. But I think in our current environment, we always have national politics to contend with. So both campaigns are really going to have to figure out how to position themselves both for Ohio, but on a national stage as well.
And this time around, at least from some of the precincts in the state, saw incredible turnout for a primary election in a mid-cycle election. I know our sister station, WTOL in Toledo, had mentioned one of their precincts saw numbers that surpassed what they saw in the general election for the presidential year a couple of years ago. And we've seen, we saw lines yesterday here in Columbus to get into a primary. We don't typically see that in a primary election. What's driving people out right now? I mean, this one to a lot of people seems different.
I think there's a couple things depending on where you are in Ohio. So I think having a lot of people turn out is great. Everyone should vote. Voting is great. It's a delight. Everyone is encouraged to vote. I think depending on which region you're in is really going to be what's motivating turnout in a primary off-cycle election. So for some areas and some precincts and some communities in Ohio, they had school levies on the ballot. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about levies later on, but that's going to be a huge driver in an off-cycle election for people who are really passionate about the schools. For other people where they did have a really competitive primary, which Ohio 9 did if you were a Republican, that's going to drive people to turn out. So having a competitive election really motivates turnout. And we know broadly from the political science research that one of the big criticisms with gerrymandering is that you get uncompetitive elections where you have people who are pretty much guaranteed a seat based on like the partisan composition, and that lowers turnout because people don't feel like their vote makes a difference. So when people feel like their vote can actually shape policy or pick the nominee, they're more likely to turn out. So you're going to see more turnout in areas with competitive races, and areas with important policy issues like school levies or other local levies that we may not see on a statewide level.
Things that will affect people's wallets.
Exactly. And like the other thing that you're probably going to see is the economy right now. Everything is tremendously expensive. And so even if you're not like picking, if you're voting in a primary election, these are not people who have like a direct effect on gas prices immediately or the price of food or that kind of stuff. But if you're feeling that directly, you may be more motivated to turn out than you were, say, 2 years ago.
And both now candidates for the governor, both Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton, have both addressed that. Amy Acton used it last night in her speech. Vivek Ramaswamy told this to Doug Petcash earlier yesterday. I'm going to play a bit of that sound now. Both of them kind of recognizing that affordability is a huge issue for Ohioans right now.
And I know that American dream exists because I have lived it. A lot of young people, a lot of people of really every age don't feel like that American dream is available to them anymore. I'm going to change that.
I am running for governor because people in this state are struggling. They are doing everything right. They're working harder than they ever have, but there is no more breathing room. They're struggling with the cost of everyday life.
So we heard it there, both candidates at least recognizing that there is a problem. Amy Acton had campaigned on this basically her entire campaign season. Her entire platform is affordability. Vivek Ramaswamy also mentioning that a lot of people are feeling disenfranchised with the American dream idea. For both, how are they going, separating each other? I guess it's going to come down to their plans on how each one's going to get there. Obviously, Vivek has talked about different forms of tax cuts, and Amy Acton has talked about different kind of social programs. I guess moving forward, how do they capture the voter?
I think it depends on which candidate is able to be more persuasive. And it's going to depend on the groundwork that their campaigns do and that we see from like these affiliated nonpartisan groups. The trick is to get accurate information out to the public. And that's something that's both really challenging from just a civic engagement kind of perspective. But also if you watch both candidates, right, they're very careful in trying to pitch like an idealized version of Ohio. And that can be really hard to achieve because some of the costs right now that Ohioans are seeing cannot be necessarily controlled at the local or state level. And then the other thing, right, with tax cuts, if you cut taxes, the money still has to come from somewhere. So for the states that have a really low income tax, they have a really high property tax and vice versa. And so a lot of this is finding a way both in their platform and in their campaigns to kind of balance the challenges that come with running a large state like Ohio. And then also being able to translate that into effective policy if they are elected. It's very easy to make a lot of promises right now. It's significantly harder to translate that into effective policy. And so I think it's going to be really important for the campaigns to make sure that voters understand what their platforms are, but also for voters to understand how they will accomplish that if elected, because it's not just getting into office that matters, but once you're there, you have to be able to do what your constituents want and to be able to do it successfully. And that's really challenging. And neither of these candidates has served in an elected office before. Right. So it's a really rare election.
Because you don't have a proven record of what their decisions and the impact they've made. I want to ask you real quick, Dr. Caleb Hughes, let's talk about the Ohio Supreme Court, because I think that one is still out there. Last I saw, 95% of the votes, but Republican Collin O'Donnell has a very slight lead for the GOP nomination. Another reason why people need to go out and vote in these primaries, because we're not just talking police, fire, levies, and schools. We're talking people who can make decisions that go far beyond what's affecting our wallets. This one's still pretty close.
Yeah, I think this just really reinforces the importance of actually showing up. A lot of our races have been decided by very small numbers, and which again, great to have a competitive election. But it really matters that if people show up, and for races like the court, right, where you may not think about it on a daily basis, but the Ohio Supreme Court even made an important decision this week in terms of who was eligible to run in this election. So the Ohio Supreme Court may seem abstract to a lot of voters, but it's very important on interpreting questions of both elections, Ohio policy, how we redraw our district lines for voting and for representation. And so some of these offices may seem abstract on the day-to-day basis, but they're really important in getting, people to represent the public. And so showing up and having these tight races matters.
And I should say, I think I needed to refresh my election page. That one may have been declared late overnight with Collin O'Donnell taking the GOP nomination. But to your point, Dr. Caleb Hughes, the Supreme Court, what they decide, something that's been really huge, whether utility companies can add those fees to ratepayers' bills. And again, these are big decisions that really do trickle down to our individual homes.
Yeah, the court makes a ton of decisions, and the Ohio Supreme Court has changed a lot in the last few years, right? We're now going to have partisan elections where we didn't, say, 5 years ago. Our most recent election was partisan as well, but we used to have nonpartisan judicial elections in Ohio. We now have partisan judicial elections. So that changes some of the campaigning calculus that we see. And so even these campaigns are going to be different. If you look at, not to bring it back to the Ohio 9, right, but Ohio 9th district was decided by less than 1% last time. So getting everyone out to vote is going to be a huge factor for the campaigns, because the campaigns are really going to need to drive that turnout to win. And that's true for school levies. It's true for local police and fire issues. It is true at the state legislative level, the congressional level, and statewide office, like for the governor's seat.
Yeah.
And I want to now talk a little bit about, sorry to change topics now real fast. I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Senate race. Sherrod Brown taking that race for the Democrats handily with 89% of the vote. So he is now going up against now Senator John Husted. So we're going to end up with two candidates with significant name recognition. Obviously,
Sure.
John Husted, the former lieutenant governor, and has now been in the Senate. Sherrod Brown holding the seat that is now occupied by Senator Bernie Moreno for a number of years. We have these two candidates with significant name recognition. Obviously, the last race that Sherrod Brown was in and now Senator Bernie Moreno were involved in was an incredibly high dollar race, high stakes. Are we going to see that repeat again?
Yes.
Plain and simple, yes.
just yes. And this is much more of a response from like a national political level rather than Ohio, right? Like obviously this matters for Ohio. Ohioans are going to be super invested. Ohioans know these names, right? Ohioans are going to turn out. But from a national political perspective, right, this race really matters. 2 years after a general election, so at the midterms, the president's party usually doesn't do as well. This is true if you have a Democrat or a Republican in office, right? That 2 years later, voters are not 100% satisfied. And so typically the opposition party does a little bit better. So already we would expect Democrats to do a little bit better. There was some concern about that because the Senate seats that are available tend to be more Republican, but Democrats expected to do a little bit better than they otherwise would in both House races and Senate races this fall because it's a midterm with a Republican president. Given that Trump's approval rating is so low and that stuff is so unaffordable, you're going to have Democrats do better than expected. And so that's what I think the opportunity that the Sherrod Brown campaign is really seeing here is that they've already outperformed the party in the previous election. So he did better than Democrats did statewide, kind of broadly defined. And so they're looking to kind of capitalize on that and go after the current administration. And my guess is we're going to see a ton of money flood in for that. The trick for Republicans for the Husted campaign is going to be to kind of walk that line between pure allegiance to the current administration, which may turn off some kind of moderate voters, and representing Ohio and what Ohio voters want. And that's going to be kind of a tricky line to walk. And you're going to see both national party organizations, super PACs, individual donors dump a ton of money into this Senate race. And so I think we're going to start seeing that happen pretty soon here. And probably in a couple months, we're all going to be very tired of campaign ads.
I think I saw a new campaign ad already this morning for one of the camps. Dr. Nicole Caleb-Hughes, thank you so much for joining us. Poli-sci professor from Bowling Green. Great insight today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, yeah, always a pleasure to have Dr. Hughes join us here on or Dr. Caleb Hughes join us on The Big Picture. So coming up next, we're talking with Tyvis Powell. We'll have more election coverage coming up this morning around 9:43, so you can stay with us. But we're going to be talking how the Cavs performed last night.
Do we have to?
A little bit,
Right.
a little bit, but we'll move on to some happier things.
Break.
It's 9:15. Welcome back.
Hi, Tyvis.
How y'all doing today?
We're good. How are you?
All right.
Well, I could be a little bit better if my Cleveland Cavaliers would win me a game.
It was a little rough.
Little
Well,
rough.
it was disappointing.
I watched that game and I was guffawed.
Guffaw.
I was sitting there like, what is this? After you go from game 7, Jared Allen looked like Shaquille O'Neal out there. And then yesterday, he pulled a Houdini. I didn't even know he was there. It was unbelievable. It really was. And then
They got a little steam.
at the end, but they was down by like 20 points. I turned it. I'm like, what is going on with y'all? So I get it. It's a filler game. It is. Like, you got the first game is supposed to go to the home team. You're supposed to allow them to win, but you got to feel each other out, see what the game plan is, and then you see the adjustments happen. But the fact that the Cavs played so poorly, they had 19 turnovers. They just was giving the ball away. What Oprah say, you get one. That's how it was on the turnover.
You get the ball.
You get one. Yeah, that's how it was. They were just giving Detroit the ball. So after that happened and they settled down and they made the comeback in the fourth quarter, I thought to myself, as poorly as they played, they still got a shot to win this thing. Obviously, it didn't go that well. They ended up losing the game. I walked away from that game positive. I said the Cavs are not going to play this well this poorly every game. And if that's the case, they play just a little bit to their standard, they should be able to beat the Pistons because I just think they got more talent on their roster. Cade Cunningham, I told y'all he was going to be phenomenal. He didn't really score it. I think he had like 20-something points and like 7 assists. It wasn't an unbelievable game. It was a very solid performance. Did a really good job of getting Jalen Duren going, especially late in that game because he was not really having a good game, but our bigs have to get more rebounds. That's how they were getting hurt. Jalen Duren was really getting them second chance opportunities, and the Cavs can't allow that to happen.
So you went from being guffawed to being positive.
Yeah, you know, I try to look at things positively in life. You know, after I sit back and I assess it all, I say, what is the best thing that can happen? Everybody's always talking about what's the worst thing that can happen. I'm like, what's the best thing that can happen?
That they win game 2.
Because, I mean, that's the thing. If they can play like garbage and come that close,
that's what I'm saying.
If they just get a little bit better.
But we got to understand, as a Cavs fan, this is just bigger than just the Cavs versus Detroit. That's not what this is about. You dismiss J.B. Bickerstaff, who was the coach that actually had you in an upward trajectory. You said that he wasn't good enough to take this team to the championship. J.B. Bickerstaff went to Detroit, and has built this thing up. You went and got Kenny Atkinson. You cannot lose this series to the guy that you deemed wasn't good enough to take you there. Like that, it just can't happen.
Well, there's a little more fire, I think, on that side than for sure to come back. All right, let's talk about football.
Let's do it.
You don't like it?
Well, they're coming out. They've made an assessment on what they think should happen to the football calendar. We all agree that college football calendar is not good. I mean, you got coaches you got Ryan Day at Ohio State trying to get ready for a playoff game, try to get his recruiting class, trying to do transfer portal, make sure guys don't hit the portal. That's a lot.
It's too much.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Ryan Day last year his beard was jet black. This year is salt and pepper. He's stressed. So we got to relieve some of that stress from him, and we got to fix this calendar. We can't have all this at once. So they gave out some suggestions. Now, some of the suggestions I agree with, some I don't. The ones that I don't is they want to go from 2 bye weeks to 1 bye week. Now, back when I was playing, I only had 1 bye week, but obviously you're talking about 15, 16 game season, so those guys need that rest time. So I would love for them to keep that, but I get it. If you're trying to shorten the window, you got to get rid of a bye week. So I'm not a fan of that. And then they want to go to a 2014 playoff. The reason that I don't like a 2014 playoff is because I feel like anytime you add games towards the end, more games to the end, you take away from the regular season. I think the NBA is the biggest component of this. Nobody pays attention to the regular season because it only matters in the playoffs. Yeah. If you do that to college football, now you're letting teams with 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 losses get in. Like, everybody's going to get in now. Like, there would never be a scenario where Ohio State shouldn't be in.
And they would do away with the conference championship too, right?
Yeah. Well, that
come on, that's bragging rights too.
It is, but it's not, because it's like
all different.
It's not like you're really losing anything. Like the team did. I don't think Miami won the ACC this year. So like,
but they still got
So like, is it really like? Does it really matter? It doesn't hold the weight that it used to anymore.
Right.
Well, at least this is not set in stone, so there's still some time to.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Mold it over.
All right, Tyvis Powell from 97.1 The Fan. Thanks so much.
I appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all on Friday.
See you Friday. We'll be right back. Coming up next is the Worthington Chamber Orchestra. They'll join us here at 9:22. here on your Wednesday. Joining us now is Antoine Clark, the Artistic and Music Director for the Worthington Chamber Orchestra. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Yeah, so, first let's kind of talk about the gala that you guys have up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's it's amazing to see the strides that the Chamber Orchestra has made. I mean, 2013 was the first season, and now we're all the way up to here that we've got this gala that's celebrating the country's 250th anniversary. As the founder of this organization, talk a little bit about the excitement of being able to move from that to here.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. The American Rhapsody, a musical road trip gala, is our first. It's our first inaugural gala, and this is our 13th season overall. So, like you said, to have started as a fledgling orchestra in Worthington to get to the point where we can really generate excitement through our programming and have supporters to get us to a place where we can have a gala and celebrate America along with the season that we've had called American Crossroads. It's an exciting opportunity for us to continue to program music that inspires our patrons and build education in our community.
Antoine, this is a different type of gala. People think you go to a gala, you sit, you listen to stuff, you eat, you drink, you be happy. Right. But this is like a traveling themed gala. Talk about that.
Yeah. So we'll be at the McConnell Art Center in Worthington. And the idea of this gala is that it's a movable feast. So there will be 4 curated rooms that are kind of connected to different regions or places, iconic places in America.
Oh, fun.
So we have Southern American Charm, Viva Las Vegas, California Dreamin', thank you, and New York, New York. And so in each room, it'll be decorated to represent that area. The food and the music will be curated around those themes. And then we'll end up in the large Bronwyn Theater at the McConnell Art Center to do Rhapsody in Blue with Caroline Hong.
Oh, how great.
Yeah, so.
That is great. I was going to ask you started this in 2013, and we were talking in the break. There are other chamber orchestras, so many throughout Central Ohio. Why did you want to create one for Worthington?
Sure. So my family, my spouse is from Worthington, and obviously I visited quite a few times to see my in-laws there. And, I fell in love with the community, and I obviously saw the McConnell Art Center, and as a clarinetist, I got to perform there. But I always had this love for conducting, and after teaching college in Nebraska, I moved back to Columbus, and I felt like, well, personally, I wanted to be a conductor, but I also wanted to give Worthington something that other communities had. And so, the idea came up to found the orchestra, and it's hard to believe that I'm 13 seasons later, it's thriving and working as not just the music director, but also as the executive director of the orchestra.
Right, and I think some people might think of orchestra as an adults-only thing, something that only adults, enjoy, but something great that the Worthington Chamber Orchestra's done is expose hundreds of kids to the works and the pieces that you all perform. You who, is a woodwind specialist, grew up playing clarinet, how important is it to continue to expose kids to some of these beautiful pieces of music that are out there?
Right. A big part of our mission is education and fostering that in our community. I'm an educator myself. I've taught middle school, college. I worked with youth orchestras around the country. And so it's near and dear to my heart that we are giving our children an opportunity to learn about music and storytelling. So 2 big programs that we do, or 3, I should say. One, I developed a program called Worthing Tunes, which we partner with the Worthington Library to have music paired with storytelling, so the kids get to come and enjoy that. We do Peter and the Wolf every other year with Hicks and Dance, not just having the narrator and the instruments, but the students get to see movement put to that story. And then we do a program called Danse Macabre every other year as well, that is all about Halloween, and kids get to learn what makes music spooky. Like we get to break down all the elements of music. So, and we've really, the city of Worthington, the school board has really embraced us, and we have a great time bringing this to our students.
Love it. Congratulations on your gala, and just such great success, and just inspiring the next generation for the love of music. That's so important.
Yeah, one more time before we let you go, the dates on that gala.
Yeah.
Yes, it's May 16th, 5:30 p.m. You can go to our website at worthingtonchamberorchestra.com. click on Gala, and you'll see all the information about that.
All right. So exciting.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
in.
having me.
We'll be right back on The Big Picture.
Welcome back to The Big Picture. Today we are honoring the high school seniors about to go off to college. So we're going to talk about Anna in just a little bit, but we're also talking about Global Scholars Diploma. Have you heard of this before, Collin?
I actually have not.
Okay, it's an amazing program in schools all throughout Central Ohio, part of the Columbus Council on World Affairs, which I am a proud board member of. And I'm so glad to also welcome Allison Hellwagon with us today because she's the board chair. Let's talk about first Global Scholars. You and I, every time at graduation, we walk away just feeling so inspired.
So inspired to watch these hundreds of kids, some of them juniors, some of them seniors. They've done these Take Action projects, which is the third year of this program, right? So they have to pick an issue that affects their community, that's some sort of local issue that also has global impact. And then they do a whole project on it for the whole year, a lot of research, a lot of interviewing sources. It's a little bit like journalism, you know, where you're kind of going around and trying to get to the root cause and all the solutions. And then they do a big presentation. So you get to walk through and see hundreds of these projects, and you walk away going, wow, you know, these kids have really done so much work, and it's a lot of inspiration, I think.
It is, and as we look at some of this video from years past, I mean, everything from climate change to water to monarch butterflies and making sure they have a migration places. Like, you walk out of this and you just feel the brain power, I almost feel like, and then you think, gosh, if adults could think like these kids, how much better would our world be?
Yeah, if we could get adults that involved in looking around, just looking around you locally and going, what's wrong and how can I fix it? That would be amazing.
And that's really the mission. Talk about Columbus Council on World Affairs. You know, it's really part of that root mission of what we're doing at CCWA.
Right. It's really to get people to kind of look beyond and see the world as a whole, right? Our organization's really committed to global education and empowering people to be more globally minded. So we really do want to get people to zoom out a little bit and see, you know, how your life and your community really does have an impact globally if you want to take the initiative.
Don't you wish you had something like this, Collin, in high school?
I know. I don't think we did. So it's an awesome opportunity. And Anna, you yourself, I love this project that you came up with, and it's a program to help with pronunciation
of names, right?
And that's fantastic, because how many, whether that be you or your classmates, have had your name mispronounced by a teacher, a colleague, etc. So where did this idea come from? How did we get here?
So obviously, you know, I've had firsthand experience with name mispronunciation, and, you know, I've always had to kind of deal with oh, Anna's an easy first name, but my last name is a little iffy. So, when things like, an 8th grade graduation ceremony would happen, I'd always be like so nervous about like, what are they going to say this time? And, I'd end up having to go up and like actually correct people before, walking the stage again and stuff. But it came from a lot of other different places as well, seeing peers, especially peers who like, their names are rooted very much so in like their culture and identity, having to struggle with this. Like, it's just not fun to see, but there's also like a science behind it too, because, we as humans are very social creatures. So, we need that communication. So when we hear our name said back to us, especially from like a teacher or someone we really respect, and we hear our name said back to us in a manner, it shows like that we are perceived and that we exist in our current like social space. So you can imagine the flip side of that being an awkward like little miscommunication on both ends, and just a bit of insecurity building up with, your name. So you can imagine the prolonged exposure being much worse, especially if the issue isn't like tackled early on.
And this happened to you like with a like a sporting event where they were calling your name wrongly on the intercom, and you got yelled at because you didn't recognize someone saying your wrong name.
Yes, that was another really like that experience is what really pushed me to do this project, because it made me realize like how many people every day like in my school, in any other school district, get punished just because they are unable to like, recognize a mispronunciation of their name. Like, why do they have to relearn it?
Well, and I want to pull up this stat that you provided to us of one of these studies that you went around, you did this, right? Went around and asked, have you ever had your name mispronounced? 72% of the respondents said yes. So this is not an uncommon issue that unfortunately is plaguing a lot of people. And so you've created this Pronounce with a Purpose. So how does this work?
Okay, so the initial Pronounce with Purpose project was simply meant to be a database prototype using very simple applications like Google Sheets, Google Forms. And from there, I kind of presented the idea to different administrators, staff in my school, and I was eventually able to work with counselors to reach out to various freshman advisories, where these freshmen could then fill out the form, which would then ask for, their name, graduation year, but also the phonetic spelling of their name, as well as a voice recording of their name. And, from there, theoretically, teachers are able to then like look up the student's name in the database and easily find like a student's name that they may struggle with personally. However, I was actually eventually able to expand on the project like I originally had wanted to do, and I was able to focus on adding a phonetic spelling feature into PowerSchool, which is a very commonly used application for teachers, when they need to check attendance, check grades. PowerSchool is what they use. And so I was able to work with the IT department as well as the technology department for the Westerville City School District. And we ended up coming up with a plan to implement a phonetic spelling feature that's very quick and easy to use for teachers and even, substitute teachers for the upcoming fall semester this year.
Did you just feel all that brain power right next to me? I'm like she took one idea and it's now district wide, and I think that this should go statewide. I mean, this is so critical, not just I think for students, but I think probably the teachers, right? It empowers them to have that stronger connection. What's the feedback you're hearing from them?
So obviously everyone's like really, really pumped because, students are being acknowledged currently that previously we're kind of just told it's not a big deal, just correct them when you have to. So, this resource being given to teachers is able to kind of subside that whole way of thinking and actually treat this like an issue rather than a miscommunication. And then teachers are obviously ecstatic because they don't have to, apologize before saying attendance, and they can have that safety net of knowing how to at least approach a student's name. And while this isn't a fail-safe, and I can't personally be like, okay, you're pronouncing this name right and this name right, it does help like anyone who needs the resource. And I do hope that I can eventually expand this to other like school districts.
I love it. And I think circling back here, Allison, students like Anna I mean, you see that day in, day out with this Global Scholars Diploma program. And it's something that CCWA really cultivates as they go through this program for 2 to 3 years, right?
Right. To really think through, your issue about this communication, and to zoom out, as I was talking about, you think about having someone make the effort to find out how to pronounce your name before you ever have to correct them, and to have that experience of someone saying, I looked up how to pronounce your name and now I can speak to you directly. It's just a sign of respect. And then it lets you feel like you can engage with this person in a way that maybe you wouldn't have before because you had this awkward exchange, or maybe you feel disrespected. And, part of what Global Scholars is teaching is all of these obstacles that we have to talking to each other about global issues, to coming up with those solutions. Sometimes they come down to things that are really, really simple and basic, like making an effort to pronounce someone's name correctly. And I think that's kind of gets to the root of the type of thinking that this program really helps instill in students.
And as we look at video from these graduations of years past, Collin, I have to tell you, if you ever go to a graduation, you walk out of there feeling like, okay, our world is going to be okay. We're not going to, kill the planet Earth with all these toxins or whatever. Like, these kids are coming up with solutions.
Yeah, the next generation has us covered.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. How can people, if you're a teacher wanting to join a Global Scholars Diploma, get it into your school?
So there's all the information about it at columbusworldaffairs.org. There's a page just dedicated for educators, so you can go in, click through, learn about what it takes to have it in your district, and reach out to someone at the Columbus Council on World Affairs who can work directly with you in your district to get that started if you're interested.
Well, I'm just so proud of you, Anna, and really all the students that I see come through year in, year out. So it's great. Yeah. Anna, Allison, thank you guys so much for
Thanks
coming
for having us.
Thank you for
Good
having
luck at Kent State.
Thank you.
So exciting.
All right. We'll be right back. really a jam-packed day.
I know. I'm like still working.
Yeah. Welcome to our everyday. But yeah, no, it's such a great program. The
big picture?
No.
Oh, what we were just talking about.
Yes.
CCWA, I started getting involved when they were doing the graduations and emceeing the graduations. And, I think what excited me as a journalist too was I found a million stories amongst the students who are finding issues in their communities and solving them. And isn't that what we do as journalists?
Right.
We highlight stories of people who are doing good, and if there is an issue, what's being done about it. And these kids are doing it.
Yeah.
So I MC their events for 10 plus years and decided to join their board because it's just one of those things that you feel like we need to get involved and we need to get more people involved to really care about what's happening in our communities.
Right. And like her project, for example,
Pronounce with Purpose
is one that, Pronounce with Purpose is one that, I don't think would have been something I come up with, but to think about how many times a day do we come across names that we're like, how do we say this?
Yes.
And this will solve that problem.
Yes.
Great. So, all right. So the primary elections are done and we have results. So we're going to talk about those a little bit here, kind of break them down. So we now know who's going to face off against each other because Secretary of State Frank LaRose is not rerunning for Secretary of State. He's moving on. To what is he running for? Anyway, so we now know that's going to be Allison Russo and Robert Sprague, both of whom are already currently involved in Ohio politics. And so those are the two that won their primary last night. So
Frank LaRose, by the way, running for state auditor.
Yes, state auditor. There it is. So Robert Sprague last night taking the defeated Marcel Stribich last night by 70% of the vote. He got 533,000 votes, which, as we've talked, yesterday's primary received a lot of turnout.
It did.
For a primary election. Incredible turnout. But so Robert Sprague joined our special election coverage last night. If you were watching on the 10 TV app, he joined Doug Petcash along with our colleagues from WTOL and KYC to talk about that. And there was some back and forth between Doug and Mr. Sprague about, okay, you've now got this nomination. Some of your campaign has said this. What do you mean?
And ultimately, I think that there's a lot of people in our country and people in our state that have lost faith, not just in the election system, but in the political system itself. And I think you see that from the far left, you see it from the far right, and some people in between. And my mission is going to be restore trust in the election system to the people of the state of Ohio so that this keystone of our great republic, which is our system of elections, which we do very well here in the state of Ohio, that people are able to trust it.
So we know that election security and trust in elections is an important issue. We hear it from both sides. We've heard it. It's been a big thing from Republicans in terms of the potential of cheating. We do know that Secretary of State Frank LaRose has said Ohio's election process is incredibly secure. That we don't really, that every election we have, they are audited, they are checked. Maybe there's less than a handful of people who try, they're caught before they, get into the polls of trying to cast a ballot that they can't.
So Frank LaRose says that. Why is this still a campaign platform for the GOP?
Good question.
If it doesn't really exist.
So, and that is something
huge
Doug and I had talked about is it just part of the platform?
Sure.
Kind of.
Because he wants to really get people in person voting, right?
Yes.
He wants to declare election day a holiday so people actually have the day off. They don't have to worry about work or how to get there. It's just they're in-person voting for that day.
And, a little bit further into that conversation between Robert Sprague and Doug last night was he wants to get rid of ballot boxes.
Right.
And, if you're going to vote absentee, he wants you to still walk into the Board of Elections office, hand that ballot off to a Board of Elections employee. And Doug pushed, okay, wait, are you trying to get rid of early voting altogether and just be like, we're only going to vote on Election Day? Robert Sprague in that interview said, no, early voting will still happen. I just want rid of the drop boxes.
Drop it off.
And there has been some campaign materials out there leading into this election that, are there these boxes in your neighborhood? No, those don't exist. If you're dropping your ballot off in a box in a neighborhood, it is not real.
Right.
So they only exist at your county elections office. So there's only one box, per county. Franklin, it doesn't matter if you're in Franklin County or Morrow County, there is one box to drop off at. He wants rid of those. He calls them a COVID era thing, and it's time for them to go. So there's that. Now, on the other side of the aisle, still talking about somewhat election security, is Allison Russo.
The Democratic nominee now.
Yes, and we know she served in the House, still currently serves in the House. But, she talked about her angle on election security.
They should have their full power to vote and vote conveniently, have their vote counted. I think that is what most Ohioans want. They want to trust that their Secretary of State is not putting their thumb on the scale to influence the outcome of elections or ballot issues.
So obviously she, is coming from a place of, we don't want any kind of influence from a political figure into our decisions as voters when we go to the poll, no matter what party you play for, whatever. No interference from that. Now, the one thing that she did say later on in there was talking about current Secretary of State Frank LaRose turning over Ohio voter data to the Department of Justice. Right. And that's been a story now for months. I covered this last year. I uncovered this back in it was June or July, when the state first got this letter from the DOJ saying, we want a look at your voter information. Right. And I mean, already a lot of that information is available, public record online. You can see, who's registered to vote, party, if you have declared a party, you can see all this stuff online. But there were concerns of what exact data was turned over. We know it was driver's license numbers, Social Security, et cetera, things like that. And that has caused a little bit of concern among people. Sure. But we know the DOJ has asked for this information from a number of states, because what tipped us off to it was that they had made this request to Nebraska. And I was like, if Nebraska is getting this, right, I'm sure we are. And sure enough, we were. And when I did the story last year, Frank LaRose's office basically was like, we're looking at the request, looking at the legality of it. The DOJ sent another letter basically saying, you need to comply. And eventually they did end up complying with that.
Right. Something that I think I read on the campaign trail, that Allison Russo, she, clearly wants more voter education. And on the flip side of what Robert Sprague is saying, she wants to install new drop boxes at every polling place. So should she win the Secretary of State's office, we'll see if that ever comes to fruition, depending on who else is in the top leadership with her. Right. And if it's GOP led. So right. And the legislature too.
Yeah. And I mean, even, doesn't matter if it's Russo or Sprague, they are still kind of hand tied by the laws of the legislature and what they can and can't do. Another thing that Sprague, mentioned he would like to do is doing citizenship checks at the polls. Like, you have to prove at the poll that you are able to vote. And once again, we go back to Secretary of LaRose saying over and time again that Ohio's election system, how we do them here, is incredibly, incredibly secure.
So we'll see what happens November 3rd. Two really well-known names, I think, in the political world. Robert Sprague, who's the state treasurer right now.
Right.
Now the nominee for Secretary of State, and then Allison Russo, who has been in office for quite some time. And then there's a libertarian, Tom Pruss, who is also going to be on the ballot November 3rd.
So in terms of statewide elections, all of these people are, we have, in the governor's race, the Senate race, and Secretary of State, it's all of these people with current name recognition.
Sure.
I don't even know, at this point, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy is the most, least name recognized, but we know that he ran for president, and then
made him recognizable.
That made him recognizable and served under the Trump administration as part of the Department of Government Efficiency. Yeah. So, you got all of these people that are bringing in name recognition into their race.
Yes.
So, but locally, we'll move locally, I guess. I don't know. We're jumping all over the place.
Locally, the school levies.
The school
Are you
levies,
surprised some of them failed?
I'm
like
not
Pickerington?
surprised. Actually, I'm not surprised.
Really?
I think, we've talked, Dr. Caleb Hughes at the top of the hour kind of talked about these school levies, is that we're asking for money from property taxes, and it all goes down to how we fund schools in the state of Ohio. But we asked for this money at the time we're in the middle of this very tense cost of living crisis. And I mean, when these were all written up and drafted, things hadn't gotten so expensive. Right. But now, when people went to the polls, they're looking at $5 gas prices and other things like
Inflation,
that.
you name it, yep.
And they go, I don't want to spend more.
Sure.
I can't spend more, I think, is what a lot of people
Well, and I
think
in Pickerington, they were essentially, voters were being asked for an additional 1.25% income tax, which is more than doubling the existing rate, right? And so for that, while the school's like, well, this would bring in $32.8 million, money that they really need to keep Pickerington the success that they want to see it continue. Clearly the voters, 63%, that's a lot of, 2/3 saying, I don't think so.
Right.
Find another way.
And they say that, this may end up costing teacher jobs, et cetera, because they're going to have to cut somewhere.
Yes.
So looking at that, Franklin Township also saw its levy fail. This is the third time it's failed in a matter of a year and a half. Jonathan Alder did come out successful in theirs, asking for an income tax. It was close, and then another, a little wider of a spread. Newark City asked for an income tax. It did fail. So we did see a lot of levy failures yesterday. So. I don't know. As Dr. Caleb Hughes has said, it comes down to levy fatigue.
Sure.
People are getting tired.
Well, and that comes a question, right? Like you were saying, when they drafted all these levies and how much they were going to ask, we were not in the economic crisis that we're in now with $5 gas prices, right? Yeah. So where will we be in 6 months? Right. Because some of these schools and townships may say, let's try again in November, give them some time to recoup and figure out the numbers. Maybe they come back with a lower levy percentage. And maybe in November, maybe gas prices will be down to $3 a gallon again. And that'll make people feel a little bit easier. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball here. But
up in the air. And because, because the legislature obviously changed how we fund schools last year in the budget. So money went away from schools. So schools are now going to the voters to ask them to carry more of that burden.
Right.
And it's complex because you hear both sides of the argument. You hear some people saying, I don't have kids in the school district, I shouldn't have to pay for this. Or I've worked so hard to, pay for my house, I don't want to pay more.
Right.
And then others are saying, well, this is our future. And also, especially in these smaller school districts, that the school district is the backbone of a community, that we need to support it. So you've got both sides kind of going here of like, what is there left to do? Where can we, how much can we squeeze?
How do you squeeze more out of a, what is it saying? The lemon,
you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know if that, I think that's the right, yeah. So anyway.
But it goes beyond schools. You were saying Franklin Township, the levy failed. That went to the first responders and the firefighters.
Because they had to close the Frank Road fire station last year.
Because of the lack of funding. So we'll see where they go with this now.
So there's that. All right. Well, before we leave today, let's talk about something fun.
Okay.
We've talked about enough
morning.
Elections. Let's talk about something fun. So Tony nominations.
Oh my gosh, did you see?
Yes.
He is a Broadway fan.
I love some of the shows.
I do love Broadway
too. The one that led the pack is The Lost Boys, but then also Schmigadoon.
I have not heard. What is Schmigadoon?
It is a parody of all of these like Broadway musicals. Like it's a kind of a parody. It's playing on the 1941 musical Brigadoon.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a couple that's kind of stuck in this musical universe. It's fun. So there's that one. Let's see who else got there. Cats also is back. We saw a lot of bringbacks of past shows.
Cats has been on forever. It's like the longest running musical.
And now it's back.
Yeah.
And, so there's that one. But the one that I'm excited for, best musical nominee is Titanic. And oh my god, it's so good. I've seen it twice.
Have you really? Where did you go to New York without me?
Before it went to Broadway, it was off Broadway.
Okay.
And I saw it twice. And it is a parody of the movie, the 1997 movie.
Yeah. King
and
of the
it's
world.
that happens, and the whole musical is told from the perspective of Celine Dion.
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
The whole musical is just, it's a
That's
Celine
great.
Dion jukebox piece. It's all of her hits.
That's great.
All tied in and scripted with the theme of the movie Titanic.
But from her perspective.
perspective.
So it's a very humorous
Oh, it's
musical.
hilarious. They
Okay.
knew the audience they were